wise man once said, there is a season for everything. The problem with everything is that it really is everything. And if it all has a season, then it all comes and it all goes. Joy is on its way, but so is pain. Blessings will arrive at our doorstep, but so darkness will come too. What makes the dark days come? What helps the good ones stay? Where do we find the happiness we seek? And how do we keep it around? There is a season for everything. So may we appreciate, celebrate, and immerse our hearts and minds in the good times. May we find good seeds there and then to plant along the way, to sustain us in colder days. And may the difficult moments, with darkness plotted for death and destruction, build within us faith and strength and hope deep within. There is a season for everything. Goodness will replace evil. Healing will reach wounds. Love will arrive. We must just remember, it's all just.
What season are you in today, church? I welcome you back to week 2 of this 3 or 4 parts series. I haven't decided yet, but I want to start off with that question. What season are you in? I'm so grateful. Can we give thanks to our worship team and Ashley's leadership for today's worship? I'll tell you this, whatever season you're in, that is some good worship. And whatever season you're in, the words of that pre-sermon video, I hope and pray that those are your prayers too, that goodness will arrive and healing will reach wounds and love will make right what other things have made wrong. We are all in some season, collectively and individually, and it is complicated because when we are in a good season, I don't know how to tell you this, but that means that next is probably a harder season on the horizon. And the hope is also, if you're in a pretty awful season, then there is goodness on the other side. What's that saying? The night is always darkest before the dawn. The best seasons as well have their rough bits, and the worst of seasons have shimmers of hope. And the hard part is, I think a lot of us don't know what season we're coming out of. We don't know what season we're heading into. Heck, we don't even know what season we are truly in. And so I think that is what we're trying to focus on in this series is, where are you? What season are you in? And what is really going on? And when I say what is really going on, what I'm really saying is, what is God doing in the season that you find yourself in? There is a very wise scholar from many, many years ago who said these words, and I think it's very wise to say, life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it. He was in a documentary film called, what was it called? Is it just Ferris Bueller? Anyway, Ferris Bueller said this in the 80s. This is a joke because that's a comedy movie and he says that line. It's not really an ancient wise saying, but I think that the phrase right there is still so true. So many of us are not stopping to pause and actually see what's going on around us. It takes wisdom to actually be awake while other people are sleeping their way through life. It takes wisdom to seek more wisdom when so many other people are saying that they already know it all. It takes wisdom to fight for goodness when so many others just say, you know what, this is a bad season. I guess it is just what it is. And it takes wisdom to fight for and with other people who are drowning in a hard season while we find ourselves in good ones. Even more so than that, the people of God, we are not guaranteed good seasons all the time. And so I'll take that one step further. When we are seeking after wisdom, it means that we could even be in a bad season ourselves and see somebody else drowning in their own bad season, and we still take the time and effort to fight for them and with them and alongside them. So let's talk about seasons for a second. I want to say congratulations to those of you in this room right now who find yourself in a lovely, blessing-filled, calm, peaceful season. Maybe you're like the Apostle Paul. This is what he said, no matter what season he was in. He said that he has been learning to be content, whatever the circumstances. And then he said this, I know what it is to be in need. I've been there, and I know what it is to have plenty. And I've learned the secret, though, in all those seasons of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. And then he says this, I can do all this through him who gives me strength. There's this reliance on God, not self-reliance, but a reliance on the one who is in the seasons and made the seasons and is with us in all things. So if you're in a good season, I hope that you are learning from God what it takes to get through that rough season that's coming up. I mean, I promise you it's coming. It's our phrase here, love well, right? If we can acknowledge that God is loving us well now whatever season we go through, we're a little bit more prepared. But I want to switch it because a blessing-filled good season is definitely not everybody's story right now. I mean, I have had conversations with many of you in this room recently, and I know not everybody's going through a great season. So if you are going through a rough, a tiring, a not great season, and you can't wait for it to end, I just want to extend my apologies. I mean, it's not my fault, I hope not, but I'm so sorry for what you're going through. I do want to tell you this, though, and I want you to listen closely. It's just like the video said. Goodness is coming. Healing will arrive, and hope is on its way. There is a loving God who is not going to leave you in that rough season. There's a loving God who's going to bring healing. There's a loving God who's going to restore whatever's broken, whatever's making the season so darn frustrating. And the hard part is, like I said before, is without the wisdom to see exactly where we really are, we also will miss out on the wisdom to see how God is working in even the hardest of days. Maybe all you need to hear is this: you are not alone. There's a loving God that is with you, but not just that. Why are you here? Why are you a part of a church? This was God's idea all along, that in the best of seasons, none of us want to celebrate alone. If you win the lottery, well, actually, never mind. If you win the lottery, you probably don't want to tell anybody because they'll ask for money. But let's say some other great thing, something good happens in your life, and you want to share that with others. What's a perfect place to do that? Other people seeking after God. These are the best people to share the best moments with. And sometimes we make the mistake of not doing the other side of it, right? When we are going through the hardest of times, what better group of people to come to than a bunch of other people who are also messed up, broken, learning, and trying their best to figure out where is God at work in the hardest of seasons. You are not meant to do all of this alone. This is the beauty of the church. Last week, we talked about this word wisdom, and I keep saying it over and over and over again. And in the Hebrew, that word is chokmah. It's not an abstract idea. It's not an abstract concept. It's an attribute of God. It's a force of God. In the Proverbs, like we read last week, it says this, that the Lord created chokmah, wisdom, at the beginning of his work. It was the first thing he did before he started creating everything else. And remember at the end of when he creates everything in Genesis, what does he call it? He says, this is good. This wisdom that God is relying on is a hard way to put it, is a bad way to put it. In God creating what he calls good, he starts off first and foremost and says, we need wisdom in this. We need what is the truest of truths. We need just raw wisdom. The point I'm trying to make is this: you were created in wisdom. And we often go throughout our lives, and as soon as things get good, for some reason we kind of part away from that. We start to make up our own wisdom and our own truths and our own knowledge. And when things go bad, we do the same thing. We stop relying on the thing that God started with when He created. And we start relying on, whatever we can grab onto, especially in a bad season when we're flailing and swinging and grabbing. Look at this. Proverbs 1:7 says this: fear is the foundation. Fear of the Lord is the foundation of true knowledge, of wisdom. But fools despise this wisdom and discipline. It is not fear, this fear of the Lord. Can we go back to that? The fear of the Lord, this is not your typical Western sense of the word fear. This is reverence. This is awe. This is humility. This is recognizing that we are finite and fragile human beings, and that we constantly are saying, God, I am not above you. I do not know more than you. I cannot handle this situation better than you can. But how many of us on a daily basis are saying that? I know there's some of us who have tried again and again and again to play God, to make sure that we protect and manage the best of seasons and that we protect ourselves in the hardest of seasons. But people who have the fear of the Lord, what it says right there in that proverb is that this is the foundation of what is honestly true. And people who are, let's just call it what it is, idiots, despise this power of God, and they despise the hard work that it takes to daily say, I fear you, God. I am beneath you, God. I'm not above you. Fear of the Lord is declaring we are not God and He is. And that humility and fear, as the ancients said, is what leads us back to this force that created everything good. And so today we have got a beautiful narrative. We're actually going to jump to it was the first book ever written in the Bible. You would think maybe Genesis, and that's not true. This was the first one ever written in the entire collection of Scripture. And so as we jump to the book called Job, that's where we're going to be today. I hope you have three things: a Bible, and if you don't have one, there's some free Bibles in the back, or a phone. It's 2021. You can get a Bible anywhere. I hope you have something to write with, and then I hope you have openness, because what we find in this ancient story, the oldest story written in Scripture, what we find is that things thousands of years ago are quite similar to how things are today. And so our reaction, the good and the bad of our reactions to whatever seasons life brings, it remains the same today as it was at the beginning. I'm going to pray, and we're going to jump right into the book of Job. Would you pray with me? Lord, it is difficult to daily admit that we honestly know very little, that we are wildly dependent on you. Because if we admit that, it also is admitting that we are not really all that much in control. God, I pray that you would help us to surrender that kind of control, that kind of pride, that kind of, this incessant need to know everything and to be everything, and to, God, help us to be humble. Help us to lower ourselves. Help us to, as the ancients said, fear you, to be in awe and reverence of all you are, because right there when we make that decision, God, and with your help, we can be exactly how you create us to be, serving underneath you and alongside you in a life that is fulfilling and true. I pray you get us there today, and bless this message as we receive it. And everybody said. So Job is this often overlooked and misunderstood story. If you'll open up there, we'll be in chapter 1, and we'll be jumping all over the story, and I have no choice. I know I always have an excuse for why I'm jumping all around a story. There is 42 chapters. You do not want me to read all 42 chapters. So we'll be bouncing back and forth between summarizing some of it and then reading portions of Job. Some backstory for you real quick. Job lives in an ancient city called Uz in the Middle East, and Job is not just very successful. It is actually said in the entire Eastern world that Job is the greatest man. Not just a great man, not just a pretty good man. Job is the greatest man on all accounts, and here's why. It says Job has lots of kids. He has a happy marriage. He has sheep and camels and oxen and donkeys. He has thousands of them, actually. He has lots of people working for him. His kids are, God bless you, his kids are successful too. They're throwing parties. We read this in the book of Job, that his kids are throwing parties. They're throwing birthdays. They're singing happy birthday like we started today. And Job is also a devout religious man. He even prays for his kids, gives offerings for his kids. I don't know if you feel this way about your kids, but it says at one point Job would do this. He would offer sacrifices for his kids and prayers because he thought, perhaps my children have sinned. Perhaps they've cursed God in their hearts. I see the little twinkle in Jude's eye. Sometimes I fear, I bet he's sinning and cursing God in his heart. So I pray for Jude on a regular basis, and I hope you pray for your kids as well. But this is a loving guy. And at the very beginning of the book of Job, it says why he's the greatest man. Apart from the family, apart from the money, apart from the resources, here is the crux of why Job is so great. It says that Job was blameless and upright. And then here it is. He feared God and he shunned or refused or worked against evil. And so I want to ask you this. I mean, I guess the question is, in some part, would people call you the greatest man or woman? Not in like a prideful way, but by the same measure that Job is here, right? I mean, get rid of all the resources, all these different things. Can you say, do you think God or some author somewhere would call you blameless? Would they call you upright? Would they say that you fear God and that you shun evil? For Job at this point in his life, everything is very, very good. And so some part of me wonders, man, is it easy for him to be called the greatest man because things are good? Which brings us to our first question today. How do you react to the seasons of life when they're kind? I desperately pray for you if you are however old you are and you have not experienced a kind, generous, blessing-filled season. Oh my word, come to me. I don't know what I'll do. I'll buy you a Cedar Point ticket. I'll take you out to lunch or dinner or all the above. I don't know, but man, just for even a moment, how do you respond whenever you've had a season or a series of moments, that's been kind? What I've found is I've had a pretty blessing-filled life, and one reaction I've had is how relaxed I get. I kind of start to forget how bad things can get, and so as I start to get relaxed, I can get kind of lazy, and then as I'm starting to get lazy, I start to think like, man, things are good. I bet I had some part in this. Things are good because I'm so good, right? I'm blameless. I'm upright, and then we get a pinch cocky or arrogant, and so I wonder, man, is that one of the ways that you respond to good seasons? Do you forget the one who actually makes the seasons good? There's another extreme I sometimes feel. Maybe when things get good, you get anxious. You wonder when the other shoe's going to drop, right? You can't even enjoy a good season because you've been in bad seasons and you know another one's coming. And maybe you were brewed in stress. And even when things get good, you can't slow down enough to actually enjoy them because you got to keep doing things. You got to do things to maintain the good seasons. In Job's good season, we already saw just in those few little lines, Job prays for other people. Job celebrates other people. Job prays for his children. Job fights against evil. Job is using a good season to bless others. And so the question comes to us as well, are you doing that? Are you in even just a momentary season, just a quick little detour off of a typically bad kind of life? Are you having just a small spot of good fortune, of blessing? Are you seeing the hope of God and thinking, I could be that for just a moment? Because in Job's story, we see that he takes his moment of goodness and he's using it to bless others. And it says why everything is looking pretty good. Job fears God and hates evil. And so God, the one he fears, is nurturing him and is blessing him and is going to keep it going that way. At least Job thinks so. I want to just say what that word is for fear. We've brought that up a couple weeks, and we'll bring it up next week and the weeks to come. The word for fear in the Hebrew is Yahweh, which I really think is interesting that the first letters of the word fear in Hebrew are the first letters of the name of God. The fear of the Lord. Fear is Yahweh. And it's this thing that is this humble reverence. It keeps us away from prideful arrogance. I actually made a cute little equation that is a good reminder for us. Look, fear of the Lord, when we have this in the right place, that God is above all, what it ends up doing is it makes us humble and it keeps us in reverence of God. And it keeps this at bay. It keeps prideful arrogance beneath it. And the minute that we stop fearing God, the minute that we let go of thinking that God is greater than all things that we are and anything we could do, all of a sudden this equation flips. All of a sudden, without the fear of the Lord, prideful arrogance starts to say, things are good because you're so good. Things are great, and they'll only stay great if you protect them and how great they are. And when we're in that kind of mood, we can't bless other people because all we're trying to do is maintain a thing that we didn't even create in the first place. And with Job's stance on fearing the Lord, now all of a sudden he has this humble reverence that keeps this prideful arrogance at bay. And in his humility and in his reverence, he can not only bless and thank God and see the good season he's in, but he can bless other people. How do you react to the seasons when they're kind? Because God wants you to not just experience it, right? That's our love well axiom phrase we say a lot here. God doesn't just want you to experience his love. He wants you to love others well. So I guess it's just like a little shame thing. Look, seriously, shame on me, shame on any of us who have ever been blessed. And instead of fearing God and staying humble and thanking him for those blessings, we are so afraid of losing that good season that we end up not blessing anybody, including God, and we end up missing out on the blessing that's just waiting for us to receive it. So I started off our whole conversation today with that whole thing. If you're in a good season right now, I don't know how to tell you this. There's a bad season coming. I'm not trying to be a bummer. I'm really not. It's just the reality of it. Life has this ebb and flow. We read in the Proverbs, it might have been Ecclesiastes, could have been Proverbs. No, I think Jesus says it himself. Whoever says it, it's in the scriptures, right? It rains on the just and the unjust. There is good and bad for all people. We all must go through it. And so when we can acknowledge that there will be good seasons, but there always will be bad seasons as well, now I think we potentially are prepared for what's inevitably coming. I wanted to talk through this real quick. I mean, that's what I said about the value of the church. We go through the best of seasons and the hardest of seasons. I was just talking to somebody recently whose kid is going through a hard time, and I brought up that phrase, and I've brought it up here before. You know it. It takes a village to raise a child, right? And then I started thinking through the I don't know. I just thought it was a funny thing. Do we ever, when we dedicate a child to the church, do we also have like a cutoff clause, right? Like if you're not familiar with dedication in the church, we essentially take a kid up here and we raise him up like kind of like Simba, and we don't have to do that, but that's kind of cool to do that. And we say, church, we will ensure that what Job says, right? We will make sure that this kid experiences what it means to fear the Lord, to be in awe and reverence of a God who loves him or her so much. And we as the church will collectively come alongside this child and support and encourage and pray for, right? We'll do all these different things. Then I thought, though, when does that stop? When do our kids stop needing us to pray for them and defend them and stand up for them and fight for them? And here's the thing, too, that's ironic about being a parent, or not even a parent, but being in the church, and we have a kid. You don't have to be a parent of the kid to say that you're going to help support them. But, man, I was just thinking, like, man, these kids, no matter how old they get, need us to pray for them and support them and fight for them. And even when we are in bad seasons, it doesn't mean that we get a pass on defending and protecting the kids. That's what I'm trying to say is, no matter what season we're in, there is an opportunity for us to not just be blessed, but to bless others. So when Jude is dedicated here, whenever we end up doing that, I just wanted to be a little bit more calm. We'll see whenever that comes. And we'll dedicate him. I want that dedication to not just be for a day or a week or a month. I want us to pledge to pray and protect and defend and fight for this kid till he's however old. And that's the same for each and every one of you. There is somebody that needs to be praying for and defending you and fighting for you. And if you're a part of this body of believers, no matter what season you come into contact with, there are people alongside you. Okay, that was a little bit of a tangent. I got to find my way back. In the story of Job, the bad season comes. And it's not just bad, it is horrible. All of his oxen are stolen. All of his donkeys are taken. All of his servants guarding those things are murdered by thieves. All of his sheep are burned by what says it's like a fire from God, a comet or something. And the people who are guarding the sheep are burned up in that too. His camels are taken. More servants are killed. And then all of his sons and daughters are killed in some kind of horrible windstorm. And then here is Job's response to all this torment and horrible pain. It says, Job got up, tore his robe, shaved his head, fell to the ground in worship. And he said, look, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised. Don't move on yet. I want to stay on that real quick. He has lost everything. So he's naked. There's nothing else left to take. And so he is just submitting to God. It says he's worshiping God in this horrible, horrible moment. How many of us in the worst moments when everything's taken away from us, when we feel like we have no control in what is about to happen or what is happening, how many of us say, I worship you, God? This is a reaction of fear of the Lord. He knows the only solution is to say, God has to do something in this. And all the stuff I had wasn't even mine to hold on to anyway. And he says, naked into this world I came, with nothing into this world I came, and out of the world I'll go the same. But so many of us, when a bad season comes, what's our first reaction? We got to protect this good season. We got to keep things the way it is. Instead of saying our first and foremost reaction should be, God, you are God and I am not. God, whatever happens in this season that is either happening or I know is about to happen, I submit to you, I worship you. How many of us do that? Because I think if we were honest, we'd say that is like 10 things down the list of things we do when we're doomsday prepping, right? Fear of the Lord should be the first thing, because when we fear the Lord, we find wisdom. When we find wisdom, we find true life. We find the way we are always meant to live. Man, even Job's wife gives up. This is the next verse. I think we have it up here. Job's wife even says this, look, Job, you are talking like a foolish person. I'm going to say it again. I'm sorry for the language. You're talking like an idiot. We have lost everything. Shall we accept good from God and not trouble? There is this push, and it goes on throughout the entirety of Job, the story of Job. In chapter 3, he screams he wishes he was never born. In chapter 6 and 7, he rationalized that he must be missing something for being cursed. In chapters 9 and 10, he's conflicted because he doesn't understand why God is doing what God's doing. And then in a bunch of other chapters, Job even flips back to defending God and saying, God must be doing. What is your process of grief, of mourning, of pain when you're in the bad seasons? How do you react to the seasons when they're cruel? Because they do come. And so many of us are not wise enough to actually handle them the way that God would call us to handle them. I'll take it even further. I mean, we said it earlier today. When things get rough, a lot of us turn inward. We say, I gotta solve this. I gotta fix this on my own. I gotta push through on my own. Instead of thinking there are people who have been through similar seasons. There are people who are in the same season you're in right now. There are people even in good seasons right now. And in all those different situations, these people want to come alongside you. And when we do not fear the Lord, we lose wisdom. And when we lose wisdom, we do not see the help that's being offered our way in the worst of seasons. How do you react when the seasons inevitably turn cruel? In the beginning, Job, it was shown that he was blameless and upright. He feared God and shunned evil. Is that where you're at? Would God call you blameless and upright in your horrible season you're in right now? Do you feel like you're fearing God and putting Him above all things? Do you feel like you're shunning evil and saying, no, evil will not have its way. The way people in the world react will not have its way. I'm going to put God at the top. I'm going to skip over, and we'll skip over this. There's quite a few scriptures I had on his friends, and the point I was trying to make is this. It's in Job. If you want to take notes to look at it later, it's in Job chapter 2, verse 11. I don't want to put it up, but Job essentially has three friends who at first come to him and they say, we need to go to Job's side. We need to help him and support him and pray for him. And very quickly, for like a lot of chapters, majority of the book, these friends start off really kind. And before you know it, they're saying, you had to have done something wrong, Job. God must be punishing you for some reason. How many of us in this room have done what I said earlier? We have gone to those friends or family or even church members, and we've said, I need help. I'm hurting in this season. And it might start off good, but maybe sometimes it doesn't even start off good. As soon as they come in with the best intentions, it just gets way worse. And then you feel reaffirmed, when I got into this mess, I should have just stuck to myself. I shouldn't have trusted anybody. Here's the point. Haven't we all not just been the one that's received poor counsel, poor support? Church, if we're being honest, we've been those people as well. where somebody's asked us for help, somebody's asked us to come alongside them, and instead of listening, we've just spouted off a bunch of nonsense because we want to be the helper. Instead of just being there and practicing a ministry of presence alongside them, we've just said a bunch of different things trying to fix the problem. A lot of times what people need when they're in these horrible seasons is just to know that they're not alone, that there's somebody alongside them, that somebody will just listen. We do not have to come alongside other people in bad seasons or even in your season, whatever season. We don't have to have all the answers. That's not the solution. What is the solution, as we've seen in the story of Job, or as we hope the story of Job will go? Fear of the Lord. Here's towards the end of, we're closing up now. Job goes through all of these different things, these different emotions in his horrible, horrible season. And then he finally gets to this point when he's trying to react to this cruel season, and a new character arrives. And these are the final two characters, and then we'll close today. There's a character named Elihu that after his friends have come in and kind of just made the whole thing worse, this guy Elihu comes in and he says this, "Look, I'm very angry with Job for justifying himself rather than justifying God." He was also angry with the three friends because they had found no way to refute Job's complaints and yet had still condemned Job, saying, "Job, you must have caused this. You must have done this." Has anybody in here ever been in a horrible season and somebody has given you this scripture? It's been quoted to me. I've heard other people quote it to them, that God will never give you more than you can handle. I want to make it clear that that is not what that verse says. The verse says that you'll never be tempted beyond what you could ever deny. God will never give you a bigger temptation than you can ever resist. But man, people, and some in this room even, I know it, have been given things that are far too big for you to handle, far too big for any of us to handle. And so what is our response? I mean, Job lost all of his kids, lost everything. Do you think that this was definitely more than Job could handle? And his response still is he needs to get back to where he started, this fear of the Lord. I want to get to my final point today. In this horrible, horrible season, Job is answered by his three friends. His wife is complaining. Elihu comes and is trying to give some wisdom. Here's the final character in the story of Job that answers Job. It's in chapter 38, and if you jump there, this is the final one. We're actually going to read a big chunk, and then we'll close today. Job is answered finally by God. God himself answers Job and says this legendary line of poetry, and I'm only going to read a portion because he does it for like 2 chapters. God says this to Job, "Who is this that obscures my plans, words without knowledge, words without wisdom? Brace yourself like a man, because now I will question you, and you shall answer me." Do you see that? Job has been questioning God for chapter after chapter about the bad season he's in, and God says, brace yourself. I now will do the questioning, and you will just sit here and listen. "Where were you when I laid the earth's foundations? Tell me if you understand this. Who marked off its dimensions? Surely you know, Job." I love that little bit of sarcasm. "Who stretched a measuring line across it?" Verse 6, "On what were its footing set? Who laid its cornerstone? Well, the morning stars sang together and all the angels shouted for joy. Who shut up the sea behind doors when it burst forth from the womb? When I made the clouds its garment and wrapped it in thick darkness? When I fixed limits for it and set its doors and bars in place? When I said, this far you may come and no farther. Here is where your proud waves halt." I want to jump to verse 18. "Have you, Job, comprehended the vast expanses of this earth? Tell me if you know all this." Verse 19, "What is the way to the abode of light, and where does darkness reside? Can you take them to their places? Do you know the paths to their dwellings? Surely you know, for you were already born. You've lived so many years." I want to close on these notes because we are over time now. How do you react to the seasons when they're unexplainable? That goes on, God yelling at Job for quite a long time. God does not need, there's no reason for God to actually give Job that explanation, but he does. But he still doesn't explain why Job had to go through all of these horrible things. And a lot of times in life, I don't know how you feel about this, a lot of times in life, some of the good things that happen, we don't know why or how they happened. And the same goes for the hard seasons. Sometimes we don't know why we're dealt certain hands and other people aren't, and vice versa. And life, a lot of times, I think this is where it's all headed for all of us. When we get to the end, it's hard to say. I think that we will have far more questions than answers still. How do we react to the seasons when they're unexplainable? Because people who fear God will say, God has this. In the best of seasons, God is the one who blesses. In the hardest of seasons, God is the one who will bring us through. But people without wisdom will demand day after day that what horrible things have happened be explained to them. And same with the good things. They'll need to know why about everything. Are you instead a person who humbly says, God, you are God and I am not. You know the way forward and I do not. You know the way out of this bad season and I do not. Ashley, I'd love for you to come back up just for a moment. My call is this, and I want to invite you to stand as Ashley's getting settled in. Everybody here in this room is going through a good season, a bad season, and in so many of these cases, we do not get explanations. Job was fortunate. Job gets this entire statement from God, even though God still doesn't explain why Job went through such horrible things. In the end, Job is blessed. Job is blessed twofold, actually. But when we look at the story, that doesn't fix that he lost his kids. It doesn't fix that he went through all these horrible things. There's trauma there. There's a lot. Job's going to need some counseling for sure. And in your life as well, even when good seasons come and you've went through a bad season, it sometimes doesn't fix the pain and the scars that you get in the worst of times. And so what is our reaction to the scars that we get in the horrible seasons? And what is our reaction when good things have happened but we can't explain it? In all things, if we will submit to God and say, the best things come from you and the worst things you'll see me through, if we can get to that position of fearing God, there we will find wisdom. And when we find wisdom, we can acknowledge what we are in and what we've been through and what we maybe are going through. Now we are not just equipped to see God for who He is and who we are underneath Him, but also we can see the good seasons others are going through and maybe help support and bless those further. And we can see the horrible seasons people are going through and not say, I've got my own stuff to figure out. Instead, we can say, I have been there, or I'm about to be there, or I know people who have been there. And when we are in wisdom and fearing the Lord, we can help those going through the hardest of times. What season do you find yourself within? Acknowledge it. Give it over to God so that the best parts of it can be emboldened and the worst parts can be protected from you potentially, or even shaped into something that would have just been for death and destruction and instead can make you into a stronger person, can make you into a person who can help someone who's about to go through the same thing. Whatever season you're in, open hands, open heart, open mind, open everything. I want to start our prayer today, if you would pray with me, and then we'll release. God, we are praying a blessing over Grace Church of the Nazarene. We are far from a perfect people, and I know you're wildly aware of that. God, would you help us if we're not a perfect people, and we're not always the nicest people, and we're not always all these different things. We're not always fearing you. We're not always wise. God, would you help us just at the very, very, very beginning to just start with an openness that in this good season that maybe some of us find ourselves in, or even a few of the good pieces of this bad season we find ourselves in. Could we take those few things and say thank you? Show them to you and say, we acknowledge that this is from our God. This is good stuff. This couldn't have come from us. Would you help those of us who are in a good season or finding good little bits in a bad season to offer them up to you and call them for what they are? And for those of us in a bad season, those of us who are maybe experiencing some bad pieces even in a good season, God, would you help us to call those also for what they are? Things that are not of you and not from you, but things that perhaps you could destroy, you could remove, or even at the very least, you could take these hard, evil parts and use them for us to help somebody else. God, help us to be a people who are humble and do not need all the answers, but in all things fear you, and in all things submit to you, and in all things go to you first and foremost. Help us to be those kind of people, because then we can love, and then we can receive love, and then we can make this world truly what you always wanted it to be, and what you call us to help it be. It's in your perfect name I pray this blessing over everybody, and everybody said, as you leave today, don't just, be nice to people as you're leaving, of course, right? But be thinking already, what season am I in, and who can I bless? We'll see you next week.